Ahoy, everyone. This is David Perry, and I am very excited for the launch of what I hope is going to be an ongoing series of conversations about travel, ocean liners, maritime history, all the things that my regular viewers from my short Ahoy videos on Facebook know that I love. Well, today, to start the series, I am in the room with arguably the foremost maritime historian on Earth, author of 5,933 books, Bill Ocean Liner himself, Miller. Bill, welcome.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm fine. That isn't 5,340 books. How many books have you written about ocean liners?
Well, I don't sit up at night counting. Well, I really do. But they say I'm up to 110.
Wow. Now, just for a little bit of history, Bill Miller and I met on the deck of a ship, which of course is appropriate enough, in 1998 when I was a junior officer aboard the ship that you can see over my shoulder, the beautiful Crystal Symphony. And we were starting a world cruise, and Bill was on board. Actually, he wasn't starting, he was in the middle of the cruise. We were in Piraeus Harbor. And of course, I knew Bill by reputation before, having many of his books since I was a small boy as a lover of ships. And Bill was pointing out old ocean liners in the port of Piraeus. And we started playing that favorite game of all ocean liner geeks, Guess That Ship. Do you remember that, Bill?
I do indeed, David. Absolutely. And weren't you writing a lovely column in the ship's newspaper about liner history?
I was. It became the first maritime history column at sea called Liner Lore, and it became a website and an ongoing series of blogs. You can find it at linerlore.com. And that day, we both knew that we were lovers of ships, and you asked me very kindly to write the foreword to your upcoming book, and I did. Thank you for that.
Because wasn't it a relative took you to Norfolk to see the United States laid up?
It was. My father and I used to go fishing on the Chesapeake Bay, and of course this was pre-September 11th, pre all kinds of security regulations that we now have to live with. And my father took our boat up into the berth between the SS United States, where she was there, you know, having been called out of service, but still waiting. And on our left was the aircraft carrier John F. Kennedy. And I'll never forget as a 10-year-old boy reaching up and touching the hull of the SS United States.
Holy objects.
Holy objects, first-class relics.
Absolutely.
Bill, how did you begin your fascination and love affair with ships?
Well, I was born in an ideal location right on the banks of the Hudson River in a town called Hoboken, New Jersey, famous for On the Waterfront with Marlon Brando, and once a busy seaport in its own right. No longer, now it's all fancy condos and gentrification and so forth. But I had, in the 1950s, a bird's eye view, front row seat of the Hudson River and the great liners sailing to Europe. And we had the newspaper schedules, and I could gauge my visits to the waterfront after school or on Saturdays and watch these processions of liners go down the Hudson River.
And from there you became, well, Mr. Ocean Liner himself.
Well, why are we drawn to certain things? It's the undefinable chemistry, like people who love butterflies or people who collect stamps. There's a draw to something. I once read that there's a wash that goes over your brain when you're born, and it defines what colors you like and things like that. Well, I think there must be some truth to that, because my brother was a year younger, grew up in the same location, never looked at the river, like Little League Baseball and fire engines.
Right. Well, it's true that whatever washed over you and me must have been salt water. And I think that actually I'm right in saying that one of your maritime mentors was the great Frank Brainard. Talk a little bit about him and, frankly, the lineage that you represent of maritime history.
Frank Brainard was the foremost American maritime historian. He wrote numerous books. He loved liners with a passion. He organized Operation Sail for the 1976 bicentennial. He got the Savannah named Savannah, and he did so many wonderful things, took part in things, and I got to know him and then work with him and learned a lot from him, wrote books with him, and then in a slight way, he passed over the torch to me, and I'll always be grateful to the great Frank Brainard, and one of the world's finest people as characters go. He was just most blessed soul.
And in addition, he was also a very talented artist, as I recall. I have a few of his books, and the line drawings were wonderful. They were his, yes?
Yes, he was a wonderful artist, a pen and ink, and he sketched most of the great liners. He did a book called Lives of the Liners, and instead of photographs, they were all his sketches.
Listen, and if you're getting choked up, I understand talking about ships, I get choked up. Don't hesitate to take a glass of water or whatever is stronger. It's a little later there in the East Coast, so I know that, the sun may be over the yard arm there, so you're allowed a Bloody Mary or something.
We're about to have a big spring thunderstorm here with lightning and thunder.
How dramatic. Listen, Bill, we could go on and on forever talking about the great age of ocean liners and how much we love ships. But today I wanted to talk about something very specific and current, and that's what's going on in the cruise industry about COVID-19. Here we are now on June 3rd, over 3 months into this great pause, as I call it, and hopefully poised for a great return and a great recovery. What is the status of the cruise ship industry and the passenger ship industry right now as we speak?
Well, as far as I can say in generalization, there isn't a ship sailing at the moment with passengers on board. Many of them are in Manila, in the Bay, because a lot of ships have Philippine crew members. Others are marshaled off Florida. They're all sitting in a kind of limbo with small maintenance crews on board, losing millions of dollars by the day. All the companies are waiting for a variety of things, an end of the pandemic, or at least a release from lockdown, CDC regulations that will come into effect of how different cruises will be, and then to slowly come back, hopefully in the fall, September, October, maybe even November, and start to recoup and get people back on ships.
Now, Bill, you have a wonderful weekly, or actually more than weekly, email, the Milligram. I look forward to it because I know every time I receive it from you, I'm going to get a bit of maritime history, but also the most current updates from around the world, from crew, officers, passengers, engineers, shipbuilders. And for the last 3 months, your Milligram, your COVID update, has really been a source of news. I urge people to subscribe to it because you have sources all over the world. Where are you getting the information from now, since the ships are, well, not moving?
Happily, a lot of the sources, as you call them, or my agents, are scattered all over the world. They've been fiercely loyal, and they've been on their own sending me information without a prod. So I'll get 5 or 6 emails in the morning when I wake up telling me about one ship or another ship, and this is where I'm getting a lot of this data. And of course, in the age of the internet, things are much faster now. News, developments by companies. You don't have to wait for that press release in the mail as we did years ago. Now it's instant, what they're deciding to do, what they're thinking of doing, and so forth. So I try to keep abreast. It is a bit of a task right now because we're talking about an entire industry.
Yeah, we spoke the other day before this interview, and you were telling me about the people that are literally stuck on ships within sight of home. How specifically, we're talking about Manila, but there are ships around the world that still have crew on board that aren't able to get home because of COVID-19 restrictions. Can you talk a little bit about that? How many people are we talking about, and how long will it take for some of these crews to see home again?
Well, there are ships scattered. There's one, for example, that went to a shipyard in Spain, and they were going to let the crew off and go home when they discovered somebody had COVID, and they won't let the rest of them off. So they're stuck on the ship, can't even get off in the dry dock. Other ships are stuck in different ports because the countries won't allow them in. So there's a high rate of alienation, isolation, depression. Some of the ships are anchored further out that they don't have a proper internet signal. Some of the crew are housed in inside rooms, which is without daylight. It is a very difficult situation. And unfortunately, some of the crew members are not even being paid.
Bill,
so they're away from home, not knowing about tomorrow or next week or next month, not getting paid, and maybe being kept busy to polish the chrome or something, but really not that much to do. And ships, are like empty schoolrooms. Without passengers, they're very, very morbid.
Bill, you and I are more used to talking about joyful subjects. This is a serious time for the industry. But before I get on to talking about the industry in general, I do want to talk a little bit more about the crew. How many, are we talking about thousands or tens of thousands of crewmen that aren't able to get home?
Thousands. I would estimate probably something like 5,000.
Yeah,
on ships. And we're only talking about cruise ships. We're not talking about cargo vessels, tankers. There are 300 container ships laid up at the moment because the cargo industry has collapsed as well. And the oil industry, the oil tanker industry has slowed drastically. So it's a gigantic maritime staffing problem.
And how many cruise ships at the moment are not able, or well, none of them are sailing, correct? There is no cruise ship in the world at the moment who's sailing.
Nobody is sailing with passengers. Nope. I would say it's about 300 ships total. Mm-hmm. And as you know, this particular year was the greatest year for building new cruise ships and ordering them. There were 125 on order or being built, plus the 300 that exist. So now it's complicating the problem of what do you do with this new tonnage coming online when you have no place to put them? Virgin Cruises, for example, introduced their new ship, the Scarlet Lady, last March. She's never entered service. She went straight to layup. The second Virgin ship, the Valiant Lady, still at the shipyard, hasn't even been delivered. These are billion-dollar ships. They've never seen a passenger.
Right. Without citing companies with bad information, can you, though, talk about some companies that you think are doing a good job of trying to repatriate their crews and do right by their employees, both on land and by sea?
Right. Well, the three giants, Carnival Corp, which has 12 cruise lines under its banner. You've got then Royal Caribbean with about 5 or 6 other cruise lines under their banner, and Norwegian Cruise Holdings. They have all made a very serious attempt, including sending ships to India to bring home Indian crew members. Carnival just sent 2 big cruise ships to Croatia so they could offload Croatian and Eastern European crew members and get them home because, they can't land them in other countries. Flights are at a minimum, and to get back into your country takes a lot of finagling. You've got to do a lot of wheeling and dealing to get people back in because Mauritius, for example, will not allow any cruise ships for a year. I mean, these are staggering things that are going on that, all right, on one hand, the governments are trying to be protective, but how hard it is for these people not to be able to get home. It's quite difficult. It really is a very, very messy situation.
Yeah, Bill, where were you when you became aware of COVID-19? I'm sure this will become one of those questions, if we live long enough, that goes along with where were you December 7th? Where were you when JFK was killed? Where were you when Challenger exploded? Where were you? And what were you planning on doing when you first heard about COVID and realized this is going to be bad?
Well, I was on a cruise to Brazil, and I heard in the ship's newspaper of a virus in China. Didn't pay much attention to it.
When was this?
This was January. And in February or 1st of March, I was on a flight coming up from Florida, and I noticed people on the plane, more than usual, wearing masks, and my seatmate kept wiping down the seat. And I knew that there was a virus or some kind of a flu going around, but I thought, why are people reacting like this? Well, about a week or two later, the whole thing burst open. I'd gone out for dinner on a Friday night. On Sunday, we're in lockdown.
What has it been like? Go ahead, Bill.
It has been a very abrupt situation that has almost come out of nowhere, but how incredibly dramatic it has been and how life-altering it has been.
Now, you are talking to us from your home and your office in New Jersey. I have been there. I know that behind you are more books than any sailor could shake a stick at. I know you have a model of New York Harbor. You have many rare paintings. You have been stuck in the museum and home that is the casa of Bill Miller. What has that been like for someone who spends more than 200 days a year at sea for you to be locked down?
Well, on one end, all of my future cruises have been canceled. So it's not that I'm hankering to go. I would certainly want to be safe. And of course, there are no ships to go on. But I always had I was in this sort of juxtaposition of I'm leaving in 3 weeks or next month I'm going. Well, that's not happening now. My next cruise, we're talking now June. My next cruise might be as far off as November because all the other things are being canceled and the dates change. As far as being home is concerned, like a lot of people, I've tried to create a little project to do, and that doesn't mean writing a book, but it means just something simple, even sometimes as the highlight of the day. So I've learned to really enjoy my home, I've read more. I've certainly watched more television than I normally do. But it's learning to, as you put, bunker in and get used to your own surroundings and make the best of it.
Right.
And
You know,
I'm not complaining at all. I'm fortunate to have such a nice place to be. But it's also, in a way, very nice to be able to say, I'm going to be in my own bed for a while now.
so you said that you may be aboard ship again in the fall. That to me is
Yeah.
encouraging. I've heard, you hear both extremes during a period like this, although there has never been a period like this in modern history. On the pessimistic side, I hear that there will be no cruise industry ever again. And on the optimistic side, I hear that, well, there will be cruises sailing again in July or August. In your experience, where does the truth lie in between those two extremes?
It's going to come back in moderation. All of the companies, take Norwegian Cruise Lines, they control 28 cruise ships. They estimate at a restart, 6 or 7 of them will come back into service, and then gradually. The entire industry will not collapse. There's no way that's going to happen. With the trillions and trillions of dollars worth of tonnage that'll be around, I cannot imagine. All of the big majors, the Carnivals, the Royal Caribbeans, and the Norwegians, have gotten partners to infuse cash to allow them to live another year. And according to their information, the number of bookings for the return to service and for next year are at high levels. People are, again, hankering to go back, perhaps not, through 2-month cruise, but a week or two to the Caribbean. The statistics show closer to home, shorter voyages, not too many long air flights. But on the other hand, the other day I got a email from one of the luxury cruise lines offering cabins on the 2023 World Cruise. So they're confident of their return, and they will return. They will come back.
Bill, in our last few minutes, talk to me about what will be the same, what will be different, what will be worse, and what may be better aboard a post-COVID cruise.
Well, I'll just speak randomly because I can't cycle in order, but I know for sure that buffet restaurants will go. That era of helping yourself to food, which is so much a part of a cruise ship, especially big cruise ships, will now be all served to you. Shows might be divided up instead of 2 a night, maybe 4, so you have less numbers in the showroom. You might board in groups. You might disembark in groups. The ship might have a reduced capacity. There will be a heightened emphasis on cleanliness on board the ship. Those kinds of things will be very much in evidence. Now, even the cruise lines are not sure how it's all going to fan out, but they're ready and they're on the edge of their leather seats waiting for the CDC to give them the regulations that they will then have to abide by.
And right now, what are the regulations? According to the CDC, I mean, every country I'm sure is going to be different, but at what point, and I know it's a moving target, I've heard various dates, will ships be allowed to leave from US ports, and when will foreign ships be allowed to come into US ports? Passenger vessels I'm talking about.
I haven't heard any dates on those things, but August 1st is the earliest for ships to depart from US ports. Now, aligned with that, for example, out of New York, fall foliage cruises to Canada and New England are very popular. But the other day, Canada closed its borders to all cruise ships until October 31st. Well, that just wipes out the whole fall foliage program. So how they're going to have to, if they do come back, they're going to have to create new itineraries for those fall foliage cruises, which in itself is a big effort. They're going to have to sort of meet the situation. And, it's not just CDC, it's governments and who would go in and that sort of thing. It's going to be a little complicated.
Right. Alfredo and I usually go to Spain to visit his family in the fall. And we were thinking the other day, maybe the way to get to Europe this year for, I guess, maybe other people will be transatlantic. Will there, you think, be more transatlantic crossings specifically to fill the need for people who say, I don't think I want to be locked on a plane for 12, 14 hours?
I think you will see a few more what we call positioning trips of ships needing to get to the US or ships needing to get to Europe. I don't think the Queen Mary will be back until the fall. And she's the classic transatlantic liner, regularly scheduled. So I don't know how much availability there will be. There might be some, yes, correct.
Bill, last question, because I like to end on an optimistic note, because I have never thought that pessimism solved any problem. what do you want to say to those people who follow you, follow the cruise industry through your optimistic lens? What would you like to leave people with who love ships and are looking forward to once again traveling aboard them?
It'll be a little like after 9/11. There will be changes in travel, but we're very amenable. We will adjust to the new situation because as a whole, we love cruising. We love standing on the boat deck, watching that sunset. We love the beautiful meals. We love just the wonderful glamour and romance of being on a cruise ship. It'll all come back. We'll adjust. It'll be as wonderful as ever, and we'll get through this, and it will pass.
Great. You know, Bill, I have to say one last thing to you. I'd like to invite you to take part with us on July 3rd. The SS United States Conservancy, an organization which I know you support, is doing a virtual gala to celebrate the 68th anniversary of the Big U's maiden voyage. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate Americana than on July 3rd, celebrating the SS United States. We're going to recreate the Colgate Comedy Hour, which of course you know sometimes broadcast from the SS United States. And me and my colleague, Mark Perry, no relation, are going to co-host this, and it's going to be an extraordinary event. And we'd like to invite you to come aboard and give a greeting to everyone. So I hope you'll join us on July 3rd.
As long as you don't make me play the banjo, I'll be happy to do the gala. Absolutely.
I promise we won't make you play the banjo. Bill, as always, it's a great pleasure with you. For those who don't know about Bill's website, you should find it. It's billmilleratsea.com. And as always, it's a pleasure speaking with Mr. Oceanliner himself.
Great David Perry.
Ahoy.